So welcome back to Waking Mad.
Welcome back.
So today we thought we'd discuss what is enlightenment.
What is enlightenment?
Here's a question.
Feeling, a being,
State of being,
state of being,
state of knowing,
state of knowing,
perhaps all the above.
maybe more.
I was thinking that, based on the research I've done, that it's the culmination of a high level of personal development, evolution of consciousness. The Buddhists refer to these beings called bodhisattvas. Bodhi referring to the Bodhi tree, where the Buddha, as in Prince Siddhartha, first became the Buddha, which is an enlightened being. And the idea is that we continually reincarnate until we, crack that egg and become aware of the nature of reality, the nature of the universe, and that obviously includes everything and everyone in it. And this is why Buddhists often, base their philosophy and their religion and their practice on compassion, because they recognize that we're all interconnected.
Yep.
So often what's experienced in this state of what they call samadhi, a state of deep absorption in meditation, which the Buddha, I gather, would have experienced to the point where it wasn't just a transient state, but it was a transformative state of being that stayed with him. I gather he had to maintain it, I don't know. But it's a sense of knowing that you are absolutely interconnected to all things past, present and future. And therefore, you know everything. You're aware of everything. However, a lot of people, when they come across some of these enlightened beings, and I gather there's a certain percentage of the world that's enlightened at any point in time to varying degrees, is they often critique them on, well, why can't you explain the nature of reality or
Yep.
perform this miracle for me or whatever. And I was just thinking that maybe that's based on the fact that just because you know something, it doesn't mean that you can actually transfer the knowing of that information or the awareness of that information,
Or translate.
or translate it using words, let's face it. Maybe you can use telepathic imagery or something like that, or metaphors or music, song, literature. It doesn't mean you can transfer it to someone else, particularly of a so-called lesser developmental level, where the evolution of consciousness is lower. It'd be like a human being trying to have a conversation with a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
You could do it, but it would be difficult. Or it'd be like a professor teaching calculus. He understands the calculus. He can do it. He can apply that to solve problems. But if he tried to teach that to a 5-year-old, who's beginning their times tables or at least counting or something like that, he couldn't explain it.
Or
But it doesn't mean he doesn't understand it or know it.
Or maybe the case that this state of being is so profound, so out of this world, that it cannot be articulated at all. It is something that can maybe be articulated using a different mode of communication. Something that we don't know.
Yeah, imagine if you were trying to explain sight to someone who's been blind since birth.
Yes.
What colour looks like, or
That's a good example.
What a tree looks like, or a human being or a beautiful woman looks like, or how would you explain that to somebody who's never seen anything?
Or explain touch.
They don't have that
Touch.
perception or perceptual memory.
Yeah.
I had an experience once where I was having an out-of-body experience, and this is along the lines of synesthesia, where different perceptual modalities overlap. Some people talk about, it's based on a brain issue, where they actually hear colours, or they see music.
See music, yeah.
So you get a crossing of the wires quite in the brain. However, I was having this out-of-body experience, and I remember flying over this granite outcroppy sort of island, and as I went from the ocean and hit the actual landscape of the island with the granite and everything, gliding at a very fast rate, I was doing like a visuospatial cartographic process. I was actually mapping the whole thing as if you were seeing a three-dimensional topographical map. it was like my eyes, which I wouldn't have in an astral body form, because you're kind of a minute, infinitesimal speck of conscious awareness, which is our true nature, actually. This body is an illusion. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yes.
That I was actually feeling the landscape with my vision.
Yes, I've had these experiences before too.
You've had that as well?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's a amalgamation of a bunch of senses all at once, that into a new sense, I guess.
A synesthesia or a synthetic cross-perceptual experience. Now, apropos the Enlightenment experience, if I was to explain that to you and you'd never experienced it, that would be really difficult. I could kind of say, imagine that you could feel with your vision.
Yes.
You can imagine, like, I don't know, X-ray specks coming out, and whatever I touched with my vision gave me a cartographical, topographical sense of depth perception. And we kind of approximate that with vision anyway. We have a stereoscopic vision. Our eye visual fields cross over, which gives us a sense of depth, and I can kind of see the outline, but I can't feel it. This experience, in this out-of-body experience, was I could feel images as if I was feeling them in my eyes, as well as in my vision. It was a new sense that doesn't make sense. I think that's what it's like with enlightenment. It's difficult to for people who are enlightened, and maybe this is a process of consciousness development, evolution at that level. I think being auto-determined. Like, I think that the evolution of the human being from this point forward is going to be more about our consciousness being developed by ourselves. I think nature has done an awesome job to get us to this point in time. But I think that, that might be, it's up to us now to evolve further.
And there's been like they see these masters. Maybe I think there's been some recordings of Buddha where people have asked them questions, and these masters have just smiled. Like, and perhaps it's not information that they can express, like we're talking about in vernacular.
Well, they may be able to render an impression. It doesn't quite answer the question that's been asked by the student exactly or specifically, but maybe that's because it can't be. It can only be felt or something.
Or maybe it can only be experienced at that point of your growth. Like, maybe if he could somehow package this experience to you, it would be alien. You wouldn't know. It's something that you can only get when you achieve that state, and therefore all you can do is smile.
And this takes me to I gather we could say enlightenment is a consciousness development experience where you grasp the true nature of reality.
Yes.
And this comes down to another point we wanted to discuss, which is Einstein's quantum physics, special theory of relativity and all that. What did he mean by the world you see is a persistent illusion? I was talking about the true nature of who we are is an infinitesimal point of conscious awareness, and even the mind is not who we are, which is quite nice when you have a disturbed mind to know that it's not you. You're having intrusive thoughts and God knows what, and you think, oh my God, I'm crazy, or I'm a horrible person because I'm thinking about, I don't know, killing someone. Not that I ever would, but it's like a revenge thing. I don't know. Well, in actual fact, take comfort in the fact that you're not your mind. Your awareness, your conscious awareness. The mind is like your hand. It's something like I could chop that hand off and I'd still exist. So therefore, I'm not my hand, but it's part of me. So you've got modes of and attributes of consciousness, perception, and aware, thinking and so on, and imagining and visualizing and creating. It doesn't mean that's who you are. I think if you strip us back, we are conscious awareness. And that's what you experience in samadhi. Conscious awareness becomes, by extension, a sense of connectedness to all things past, present and future. Because you realize consciousness and that pure conscious awareness beyond even mind has no limits.
It's a bit like you and I are 2 drops of water. Okay, now 2 drops of water is nothing. But when you put 1 million, billion, 100 million, 1,000 million, million, billions, right? Put them all together, you get an ocean. And you can do a lot with an ocean. Sustain life, tidal waves, all sorts, right? and that is non-self. When you realize,
And this is the idea of the holographic universe too, where
That's
each
right.
molecule, so to speak, represents the entirety.
Yes.
That's what a hologram is. Each part represents the whole. And you can recreate the whole from each part. It's almost like DNA could create a whole human being.
yeah,
It represents the human being, you know?
yeah,
So therefore, as a unit of consciousness, we actually represent all consciousness,
all consciousness. Yeah,
which you experience in these enlightened, altered states of consciousness, whether it be LSD or, you know, ayahuasca, peyote,
yep. They change your frequencies, the
or indeed
configuration,
meditation, which is probably the soundest way to do it.
change the radio tower, so that you can perceive these different.
So what do you think
Dimensions.
Einstein meant when he said the world you see is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one? Is he talking about consciousness creating the nature of reality, or is he talking something about fundamental physics? What do you think?
Well, I think it comes to a point where like science and physics, quantum physics, are all are trying to get at that there's some sort of component here that is consciousness, and that it is not what it seems to be. As in, it's not always measurable.
So this solid world
Yep.
is not what it seems to be.
It's not what it seems to be.
So it isn't actually like this.
That's right.
I gather because we have evolved in this world, and I mean my perceptual apparatus being my body, the neurons, you know, the various sense organs and so on, is a product of this physical reality. And my consciousness, as we talked about before, is being channeled into this meat spacesuit, so to speak.
Yep.
Projecting my consciousness into this experience.
Like a radio tower.
But it's not necessarily bound to this experience. That's why we can have out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences,
Yep.
etc. As well as psychokinesis, telepathy, precognition. That means non-local consciousness. Your consciousness is not local or bound to this brain. The brain is more of a transceiver of consciousness. You know, and so this reality, as I'm perceiving it now, like this chair having physical structure, and this book having physical structure, and I can feel the pressure in my fingers, and I can see it with my eyes, and I can smell it, and so on. And the form of the world, and a lot of that's visual as well as felt, isn't actually intrinsic to its essential nature. And so to speak, it's not actually real.
Yes.
As Einstein said, it's an
An
illusion.
illusion, yeah, because it's appearing to be something, but it's actually not what it appears to be. And that's what.
So we can
means.
doubt our sense perception.
Yes.
I think Einstein was talking about obviously atomic structure.
Yep.
He's talking about quantum physics,
Quantum physics.
which is the very, very small physics, the subatomic particles. So if he's talking about atoms, the idea being, and this is a model to explain the fabric of matter, you know, you have a nucleus of subatomic particles being neutrons and protons, and then whizzing around that at the speed of light, I gather, are electrons.
like a planet, a sun and its planets.
Exactly like that, which is quite interesting in itself.
Funny how the pattern repeats itself.
Like a hologram.
Yeah.
And so we're made up of this same stuff, but the atoms themselves aren't solid. They are it's more the case of valent charge, electrons, negative charge, protons, positive charge, neutrons, neutral charge. And based on balances and numbers and frequencies of how many electrons and protons and so on, you have different elements. You know, hydrogen's 2 electrons, 2 protons, and so on and so forth. And then you get different atoms coming together to make compound molecules. And so these are actually energetic points, electrons and protons. They're not actually physical mass or physical matter. And so atoms are more energetic structures, if you will.
Yeah.
Energetic relational particles.
Yeah.
And then they come together in a holistic sort of form, which is discrete from other forms. We call those atoms. And they become, obviously, molecules, and it becomes matter.
And see, they stem from,
But the matter is actually energy, right? That's the point.
yeah, the atom has within it particles, and I think those particles have like quarks and gluons, I think. But anyway, particles.
Smaller and smaller, yeah.
Yeah, they get smaller and smaller, and a particle is really fast. And in the double split experiment, which I believe we mentioned before, how when you look at something, the particle changes, between a wave.
The particle's behaviour.
Yeah, the particle's behaviour changes between a wave. So here we're talking about the ocean, to single drops of water, depending if you're looking at it, like watching it, or not.
The observer affects the nature of reality.
So it changes between self and non-self.
So Einstein's talking about this being an illusion, solid structure.
Because it's perceived, it's being watched.
It's being perceived, right? Yet this isn't, there's no such thing as matter really, because particle physics tell us that this is energy.
This is a wave. Particle physics tells us that this is connected to you, I, every other atom via a wave like an ocean. Yeah? So when you tap, sound resonates like you would a rock in water. Boom, the ripples come out.
So I gather if you were to really see this structure, you would be seeing relationships of parts rippling through energetic constructs. You would be seeing the energetic form of things.
You just see pure energy in these constructs.
I wonder what pure energy looks like though. Like the Matrix.
Matrix or light.
So I think Albert Einstein, good on him, was talking about the fact that matter is actually energy.
Yeah.
And energy cannot be created or destroyed, it just changes form, right?
Yep. Well, similar to how
can be debated, I don't know.
Like similar to how water can be liquid, gas, solid, and a plasma, right? You have the particles, which the water can become those states depending if you slow it down or speed it up. Now particles are the same thing. If you slow down particles, they become atoms, and then you slow down atoms, and you get bigger structures. So it's interesting.
So it's about speed as well.
It's about speed. Yeah.
Frequency.
So
we're frequency specific entities.
And that's what I'm saying.
Consciousness is frequency specific.
We can only perceive and interact with a very small spectrum of everything that is out there. Like we cannot see or perceive or experience everything else. Just this tiny little part.
Well, I don't know about you, but this conversation has made me somewhat hungry and thirsty. So we can pick this up on the next podcast of Waking Mad. If you're okay with that, Jess?
Sounds good.
We would like to talk more about the world we see as a persistent illusion. This does take some thought, some philosophy. We may be reinventing the wheel in many ways from other philosophers and scientists, and that's okay. And we'll do some fact-checking, and we'll always add some fact-checking to these podcasts as best we can in our references. And I'd like to also talk about experiences with perception in altered states of consciousness, as per the out-of-body experience I gave. And I had a particular experience in Zen meditation at a retreat where I felt that reality was falling away when I had this experience of a nimitta, which they talk about as an artifact of consciousness, a blue pearl that I was seeing, which in one school of thought is something that you can meditate on. Seeing this beautiful blue sphere of light with your eyes open when you're meditating, it's kind of trippy. And another school of thought is that this blue pearl or nimitta is a portal which you can go through. And I think I went through it at this particular time. But we'll talk about that next time, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.